What is fat fasting and how do you do it? You only consume fats, and that's it. Tall fats, short fats, wide fats, thin fats, only fats. Fat fasting is unique. It's technically not really a fast because you are eating, but it does allow you to get a lot of the benefits of a fast that you would normally not get until you're like 24 to 30 hours into a fast. So on one hand, it's sort of like you're jumping ahead, but on another hand, it's a little bit of a different ballgame. It all comes down to something that I'm going to address thoroughly in this video called PPAR. Now please don't be nervous because I know PPAR sounds like a crazy scary acronym, but it's simple and I'll explain it in a very easy way. Hey, please do make sure you hit that red subscribe button, then hit the bell icon, and then after this video, if you do me a solid and check out Thrive Market down below. They are who I use to get my groceries delivered, like my pantry staples, my keto items, my fasting items. I've been working with Thrive Market. They've been a supporter of this channel for over 3 years. They are super awesome, but they're very economical too. So you can get your groceries delivered to your doorstep without having to go to the store, but you can also search for very specific foods that you wouldn't ordinarily find at the store, right? Or you might have to find it at a specialty store. So you can look up keto items, all this stuff. Anyhow, there's a special link down below for you to use if you want to try Thrive Market. So use that link after this video. I'll put things in context to make it very simple. Our cells in our bodies are only taking action and doing things as a response to their environment. Remember, our cells don't have minds of their own. Our cells they feel a certain way based on the environment. What I mean by that is when they're in the blood or in the tissue or whatever, they might sense that there's certain hormones around. Or they'll sense that there's certain adipokines around, which are things that are secreted from fat. Or they'll sense that there's myokines, those are secreted from muscle. So basically, our body is constantly sort of marinating these cells in different things. And that triggers a different result based on what they are marinating in. Sometimes they're marinating in glucose, sometimes they're marinating in fats. But anyway, it's all a feedback. But one of the most important things that a cell can sense is nutrients. Are there nutrients or are there not nutrients? Are we hungry or fasting or are we not? This all creates a feedback and that determines how the cell operates. In the world of fasting, we have two primary sensors, AMPK and PPAR. With fat fasting, we really focus on the PPAR, but let me explain what this means for just a second. So AMPK is like Mr. Fix-It. AMPK wants to fix the energy shortage problem. So AMPK gets activated when it suddenly recognizes that we are expending more energy than we're taking in. So AMPK will get activated during a workout. You're pumping some iron, you're going for a run. Well, you're obviously burning more calories than you're taking in at that moment. So AMPK says, uh-oh, let's liberate some fats, let's liberate some glucose to fuel this person. Okay? But AMPK also activates during the early stages of a fast, right? All of a sudden, there's not a lot of food coming in. So AMPK says, well, uh-oh, feed this person, feed this person, feed this person, up to a certain extent. Eventually, AMPK hands its job over to PPAR because PPAR has to do with fat. So once we've burned through kind of our stores where our AMPK is trying to liberate glucose and all this, then it's not as important. So that's why during a fat fast, it usually has to be a little bit longer. To get a benefit out of a fat fast from AMPK, you usually have to be fat fasting for 2, 3, 4, 5 days. But I'll explain kind of the intricacies of it. But generally speaking, with a fat fast, you're consuming like 1,000 or 1,500 calories coming from pure fat. So it's not hard to do it for 3 to 5 days because you're still consuming a good amount of calories. But what you're doing is you're marinating your cells in fat, which will activate something called PPAR, which is where it gets really interesting. So PPAR usually comes in during the later stages of fasting. It's like a rite of passage. It's like once you fast for a certain length of time, you get PPAR. And PPAR activates all the machinery within your muscles and your body to use fat more efficiently. PPAR is the essence of fat adaptation. If we get more PPAR, we are more fat adapted and our body is ruthlessly efficient at using fats. Well, if you're fat fasting, here's what you're doing. Your insulin levels are practically zero because you're not consuming anything except fat. Your calories are low enough that your body doesn't want to store those fats. but you're consuming a high amount of fat, so your blood is full of fatty acids. Well, PPAR is activated by fatty acids. That's why it usually doesn't come in till later in a normal fast, because it takes time for your body to preferentially be using fat. So normally during a long fast, your body is burning through glucose, burning through this, burning through that, and then towards the end of a longer fast, it starts to exclusively use fat. The more that we can marinate the cells in fat, the more PPAR we can activate. And here's how it works. Okay, the fat enters the cell, and when the fat enters the cell, it activates PPAR. That PPAR goes further into the cell and goes into the nucleus of the cell. When it gets to the nucleus, it binds to proteins and it expresses genes. So PPAR travels to the center of the cell and says, hey, all of y'all turn on the fat burning mechanisms because this body is running on a lot of fat right now, so we need to make sure we're shifting the gears. Think of it like this. It's like a railroad track that has those two different directions you can go. And there's that big lever that the engineer will get out and pull, or the conductor will get out and pull to shift the gears from one track to the other. Okay, well, let's say that track hasn't been used for a long time. Okay, if you're trying really hard to pull that lever, you're gonna have to work really hard, right? So one direction is glucose metabolism and the other direction is fat metabolism. You're trying to shift that gear over to fat metabolism. Okay, but if you don't use it, you lose it. So if you haven't been fasting a lot or you haven't been doing this kind of thing, it's gonna be harder to shift that gear. But once you have more fats in the equation, it's like you have more muscle to be able to pull that lever and get yourself over to using fats. So when you have these high levels of fat, it means you have more PPAR, and that means more gene expression, and that means you get fat adapted quicker. Now back to the whole thing about if you don't use it, you lose it, right? Well, that comes into who is fat fasting good for? Well, fat fasting is great for people that are trying to get fat adapted, or it's great for beginners, okay? Why? Because it helps you get fat adapted without having to go through the stress of fasting. Remember, the goal here with fasting, with keto, with fat fasting, is to get your body fat adapted. And remember, let's look at those railroad tracks again. You have fat adapted going one way, you have glucose adapted going the other. If you're used to eating 5 meals a day and you're used to eating a bunch of carbs, your train is constantly going to the left. It's constantly going down the glucose train. Okay, and it's hard to get fat adapted. Remember, it's that rusty lever you're pulling. So you pull that rusty lever, you're pulling it, and finally you get fat adapted. But remember, it's also easy to get stuck being fat adapted too, right? We want that lever to be able to flip easily. And fat fasting makes it so that you can condition yourself to be fat adapted, but also flip back to glucose when you need to. We want that lever to be moving nice and smooth. So fat fasting acts as sort of a WD-40 on that little lever, right? Now, it's great for beginners to fasting because sometimes it's hard to do a 16 or 20 hour fast if you've never done it before. But it's a lot easier to say, well, I'm going to fat fast for 48 or 72 hours because you're not actually depriving yourself of food or calories. So then you're getting all these benefits, accelerated fat adaptation benefits, without having to go through, let's call it, the necessary evil of the early stages of a fast. We're jumping straight ahead to the end stages of the fast that give you the fat adaptation. It's also good for people that never do longer fasts. Maybe they're consistently doing 16, 18, 20-hour fasts, but they never push it with prolonged fasting because they just don't have a desire to, or maybe it's too hard. But they're not getting that super rich benefit that you get from a prolonged fast. So this is a great way for that person to sort of jump ahead in the line. You're kind of leapfrogging because what you're doing is you're creating an abundance of fatty acids that would emulate what you would be at after 48 hours of traditional fasting, right? Okay, the other thing is for people that are doing a ketogenic diet that want to accelerate the benefits and get themselves more fat adapted. Okay, perfect thing for someone doing a ketogenic diet to once every 60 days or so do a 3-4 day fat fast. It's going to get your body more primed to making ketones, which kind of leads me into the next one. It is phenomenal if you are trying to create more ketones, go through ketogenesis, right? Especially important for people that are doing like a therapeutic style of ketosis where they're trying to get more what's called histone deacetylase inhibition, if you know, you know, but also just trying to get more ketones for cognitive function, for sort of the healing aspect of that. It's great for therapeutic ketosis because you have low levels of insulin, low levels of calories, so you're not storing any of these fatty acids, and then you're bombarding your body with a lot of fats. So you have no choice but to upregulate fatty acids in the blood, and that upregulates ketogenesis, the creation of ketones. So that way you have all the enzymes, all the mitochondrial machinery to create more and use more ketones, which works out phenomenally well. Okay, and then the next one is going to be those that are seeking a different kind of autophagy. Okay, so autophagy occurs when we fast, and it occurs via a canonical form where it's just the absence of mTOR activates certain levels of cellular recycling. Autophagy is where your cells kind of break down decrepit, useless components of themselves for fuel because we're starving, right? So it starts to eat itself. Well, that's sort of the canonical form, okay? Well, it turns out that fat fasting, when you're consuming unsaturated fats, actually allows you to get more out of autophagy in a different pathway. So there's a different kind of autophagy that occurs, a type of autophagy that normally wouldn't occur until you are way deep into a fast. So if you're into like autophagy and you're into that cellular rejuvenation, this might be an interesting way to leapfrog to a different form of cellular rejuvenation. Now I'm gonna post up another video that breaks down how to do a fat fast and who it's for, and a little bit more of that detail here shortly. So I'll make sure I link to it down below if you're watching this video later on. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.